Welcome to another episode of TNFro is Reading. I'm your host, Felicia Baxter. In this episode, I am comparing how people and how COVID-19 has made us all look like a bunch of crackheads. How this didn't come up until my interaction with Crackhead Dan. And also, I'm continuing my pretension as a screenwriter and writing the Hamilton Heights pilot. And I'm so glad and I'm hopeful and praying that people that are better than me will survive this pandemic and give us the content we so duly deserve, because I kind of suck at it. But I hope you enjoy my pretensions as much as I have enjoyed pretending to create content. Thank you. Welcome back to this segment of the episode, COVID and Crackheads. What they have in common. Well, why do I keep making this comparison? Because I honestly believe that I have been in the presence for about a good 4 or 5 days of honest to God crackhead. I got jacked of my blower and I'm still mad about that. But it took me a minute to basically realize that. And I don't make light of this at all. Drug addiction is a serious thing, but it just seems like certain drugs have a special cachet because you don't realize the why people would subject themselves to being destroyed for that also fleeting but powerful high. It's a way of escape, and it allows you to think you have more superpowers than you actually truly have. And it also leaves permanent neurologic damage. I honestly believe that. And what it reveals in this society is people will want to survive, they want to live, but they want to do it on their own terms. And damn it if whatever gets in their way of that next hit, of that next score, of that higher than most high. And what the drug abuse epidemic, it never went away. Just got different names. We call it meth, we call it crack, crank, heroin, black tar, Buddha, Mary Jane. Whatever impairs you, it affects not only you, but a society as a whole. Also, as any epidemic, and with that said, I think I equate the protesters on the level of a crackhead, because what they do just doesn't make any sense to me. We're all suffering from cabin fever. Some are taking a more creative and we're very proactive in preparation for this lockdown and the potential for it dragging on until the middle of the year. Granted, most hermits are like myself, and this is just another week for us. If you tell me I don't have to go anywhere and I need to stay away from people, I'm actually okay with that. And interacting with people, again, on my terms, I'm actually okay with that too. But I do know that I'm going to need to interact soon with people for a prolonged bit of time, because I'm getting weird. That is why I'm so grateful for the personal relationships I have with my friend Yvonne and my cousin Viva. My cousin Viva is right in the epicenter of this. She lives in Williamsburg, or is it Bed-Stuy? I can't remember, but she does live in Brooklyn, and she's surviving this. And I want to get her slant on living in the middle of the city of this drama. I also think when she got sick back in the fall that, or excuse me, the beginning of the winter, that she actually had COVID. And I'm so scared that, knowing what I do know of this particular virus, that she could have gotten taken out. But I'm just so happy that she got better. I'm also just tickled pink with my ride or die friend, Yvonne, because uh, my whole reaction to being jacked by Crackhead Dan, she went straight Southside Chicago in defending and getting just as upset as I was, you know, and I'm just blown away by people that keep you grounded. And I've always had these people that have always kept me grounded and kind of get my point of view. Sometimes my point of view was pretty quirky. So hats off to Yvonne Patrick and Viva Brown, my two homies, Chicago and New York. And getting back to what I was talking about. So in the midst of this COVID and being a relatively a hermit, even prior to this, you know, the lockdown is really not affecting me. I'm blessed that I have a job that I've been doing from home for almost a year now. I'm blessed that I have a really cool boss. Um, for once, I don't have to worry about rent. I don't have to worry about being able to pay my mortgage, and I got a little bit of savings in the bank. I'm still working on potentially having anywhere between 3 to 6 months of savings, just in case I got to break camp come November if this fool in the White House gets reelected. What this virus has shown us is just what type of tomfoolery is going on in DC. The government ain't shit. You can't believe them. Supply chain ain't shit. The medical establishment ain't shit. The legal system ain't shit. We've all known this for forever. And so when you got a government that basically is telling you to stay inside so you won't die from this virus, and you have to work because you got all these bills, etc., you start acting like a drug addict. You start acting like a crackhead. You start having protests because you think the shutdown shouldn't happen. You think they're stamping on your rights to be stupid, granted, and you know you're compelled to survive and pay your bills and not go bankrupt is more so than listening to a government that has been hands off and that you can't trust, and you know they're not going to take care of you anyways. It reveals this virus, and this epidemic reveals a dichotomy and a glaring social divide, that people are so self-sufficient that anything that tells them that, and so independent that anybody that try to tell them like a overall government issue or a overall government oversight is just so repulsive, from the fact that we all have become sociopaths because you can't trust anybody. Nobody's else feelings make any sense except for yours, and you have no respect for authority. We are a society of sociopaths, for real, to the point where we will kill somebody else even though and without any care, because what we do know is that they're so high, a large part or many infections are people are asymptomatic. They never either they develop mild disease or no disease, and you can go on to continue to infect and kill somebody else. And even with that knowledge, and I don't think people trust that. They really don't say, if I can't see it, then I don't believe it. Because that's what we've also learned in dealing with the government, even with the renaissance that was with Obama, and definitely with this craziness that's going on right now for the last almost 4 years. We don't trust anything because sometimes we get stuff presented to us as fact and we find out it's alternate. And then we have and you know the true experts were actually fired years ago, so we can't trust the talking heads that are reporting this crap now. So where do you believe and where do you go? So some people are like, I'll just take my chances in going out there. Because I don't know. I know I have to work. I know I can't trust these people because no one is giving me any support to trust anything that they have said. And I'm wondering because and again, the numbers are actually been off because we need tests, but we don't got enough tests. So how do we know that the numbers that they're reporting daily are actually true or not? And the only way to truly prevent probably the spread of this particular virus is, and can the virus actually go dormant? That's the other thing. Because we know, I don't think we know enough of the natural history of this virus to realize that can it go dormant for a minute? The body gets rid of it, but can it survive somewhere else in another system, in another vector? Just lay and wait for another susceptible individual to come by and so they can infect them and then can start to grow again. I don't think we actually know that. I don't know if it has the same type of life cycle as the herpetic virus that can go dormant for a number of years and then you have an outbreak. With the seriousness of this, it doesn't seem like our immune systems can build up the defenses enough to actually keep it in check. So you only get enough cold, you shake it, and then you bowl off. This virus seems to be and knows that when it does run its course, it leaves damage or it kills you. So with that said, nobody looks to that long term. And the only way of being able is to all of us becoming in a bubble and waiting for a vaccine to actually be developed so we then can be treated. But then we don't know if the vaccine is going to work and keep us from actually getting sick. And actually then true treatments. And there are very few antivirals on the market that work like the AIDS virus that can get you to zero and then somehow protect your immune system. But the side effect of the drugs themselves actually can probably hurt the immune system. But there's a checks and balance with that too. However, again, most people can't process all of that. And what is the bottom line of trying to reduce infection? But what I do believe is the protesters just reveals cabin fever. It reveals so much about our sociopathic society. And I say that with a grain of salt. This is just me being an observer, sitting on the sideline, looking out the window of my house. And am I planning on going anywhere anytime soon? No, because nothing is worth me risking my life for anything or for anyone. I'm good right where I am. And why I can report and compare us to crackheads and sociopaths is because it's kind of true. Look at it. A sociopath truly does have no respect for authority. can't trust the government because of our current experience and past experience, have no empathy. People really don't care. If I am a carrier and I could potentially infect you, why wouldn't I stay on lockdown? Why won't I just go sit down and be quiet somewhere when I know this is probably the most effective, because it makes sense. Sociopaths don't care anything about that. Doesn't make sense if you open up and tell people to go back to work and everybody gets sick and die. Then who's going to run shit? Nobody thinks about that. But with that said, I think that we all should look at what is compelling us to make some of these crazy decisions, and why are we protesting, and what does that say about us as a society? And is it okay? Of course it's not okay. You can't have a society of sociopaths. And I'm hopeful, and this virus, the great equalizer, it's taken out a lot of talented people, a lot of people that with some sense. It's like it's calling the herd. And I'm hopeful that people will take this time to look at what that means and make better decisions. That's all I can hope for. Maybe some of these people that are protesting, I'm hopeful not are carriers. And what is it going to take for them to shut up and go and sit down somewhere? Is it going to take them getting infected and getting ill and God making them shut up? Meaning a tube down the throat and paralyzed and sedated because they're in respiratory failure, because they were out protesting when they should have been social quarantine and in not in practicing social distancing. What is that? What is it going to take? And I honestly think that's what's going to take. I would prefer to self-quarantine my own damn self instead of the Lord saying, "Whoop, tag, you're it, and either I'm going to call you home or I'm going to make it real hard for you to be down there because you're going to have to suffer a little bit." I'm just saying. That's what this virus, this plague-like virus is saying. So that's your choice. Self-quarantine, social distance, or let the Lord do it. I would prefer to do it on your individual own. Don't let the Lord step in and tag your butt. And that's all I'm going to say about that. So now, rounding out the corner of this episode, I did something really different. Again, I bought a hacker level Dell computer not too long ago. That was after my first raise, not a raise, but as from my first bonus from my job. And I still consider the work that I do my day job during the day. I'm still relatively new at it because although I've been a member of the group for almost a year. Actually, it's been a year. I came in as a contractor and went full time in this last summer. But I am still learning the ropes, and I get to learn something new every day. That's the same with this hacker level computer. In fact, the computer itself has a lot of capabilities. It has a lot of room on it that allows me not only to play video games, because that's why I originally bought it, but it also allows me to copy and cut and edit my episodes. I get to write. I've downloaded and I am experimenting with a script writing software that I learned about from Shonda Rhimes through the masterclass. And one of the things that I'm actually writing or using as a basis is Henry James' 19th century novella, Washington Park. And I basically fell in love with this, a version of a screenplay of this a number of years ago, because I used to watch AMC, and I think that is the first time that I watched Washington, the Heiress there, and then I bought the DVD. And I think my DVD is in a case in my home in Fayetteville, but that's neither here nor there because it's actually available online. It's not available for streaming at this time. There is a version also of it that dropped in 1996 that starred Jennifer Jason Leigh, aptly called Washington Park. And I thought it was a great, and it stuck to the storyline with a subtle twist. And I think today it was just so good and it's available that I'm probably going to end up watching it again. But then there's a whole bunch, several other books by Henry James. Like, I believe he also wrote The Age of Innocence. And he also wrote, what is this? Another female-based book, which I find interesting that a dude would be writing about social norms from a female perspective, but he ain't a female. That's what they say actually about Tyler Perry too, in his take on females and mental illness. I wonder it's the same thing with Mr. Henry James. Did he just admire women so much, or he had in his direct circle women that were just so difficult and he basically had to write them up as characters? I'm wondering if the other women in his other books are just as superficial and lacking of depth, because that is how he observed them, because he ain't a woman. It's like, how can you write from my perspective if you are not one of me? But getting back to the book itself, it does take place in the 19th century. There is the location, Washington Park, actually exists to this day in New York City. It is where the upper classes actually live. It's a story of a young woman who is an heiress. Her father's a doctor. Her mother passed away, which was not revealed in either movie, was the fact that there was also a brother who died at the age of 3, probably from RSV or the flu or something of that nature. Some type of meningitis that could have been prevented if there were vaccines. But that's neither here nor there. Not too long after that, she gets pregnant again with Catherine. And the mother then dies a week later after Catherine survives. Catherine would grow into, they said she was a robust baby, but she was not smart. She barely remembered names. She had no complex, she had no way to understand complex ideals, and she was extremely shy. And her being extremely shy kept her from interacting on any level of anyone because she knew of her own limitations. Well, her father withheld his love and his attaboys from her because he blamed her for living because his love of his life and his son died. And she came on this individual that was just so basic and just such a disappointment to him. So he would punish her with withholding affection. But if he was smart, he would have encouraged her to do things and would have found out what she was actually truly good at and encouraged that. From music to the arts to her embroidery. Showing something, but because he was so angry with the death of his son and his wife, he wasn't able to give her the encouragement that she so desperately craved. And then he puts in place a very cheap governess in one of his sisters that he truly admits he don't like his sister either because she represents everything vapid and stupid in the world. He puts someone in charge and expect her to become a model person when she is not given sane instruction, and then complains about it. It comes to pass. How is she supposed to figure all of this out if nobody is giving her any instruction that's going to actually help her get his approval? That's what tripped me out. It is about a study in class, and it's about how people waste their time and money on things that mean absolutely nothing. She falls in love with someone that is just so beneath her. He cuts a good figure when he was young, that is. But he's a layabout. He got his own inheritance and then took a year and spent it chilling and gratified himself in Europe. Then he comes back to the United States broke and lives on his sister, who has 5 kids. And evidently, he basically says he's helping the sister when the sister is actually helping him. Even though she knows he ain't shit. She says that for what he is, she agrees because she got sense too. He agrees with the doctor, but his doctor's motives are more punitive because just even though he may or may not squander Catherine's money and he may or may not love her, that basically assures that Catherine's not going to give him up and she's going to waste her love on someone that does not deserve the love. And maybe that's what it is. These pursuits of the upper class consume their time, but they don't spend any further time improving themselves. And then maybe if she had spent, or she could have, or thought she could have spent this time improving herself and pursuing the other two little people and recognize what true love is. That's the other thing that tripped me out about this. After Morris leaves, she has 2 other suitors. One was actually truly in love with her, and he was a lawyer and had his own profession, but for some reason she was so stuck on stupid. She was more a slave to something that she did not have, and she missed a grand opportunity to make a good marriage with someone that was right there. Or she doesn't, or she was just making a statement. Maybe she doesn't need to need marriage or children in order to be happy. Maybe that's the more broader term. And maybe that's why he was such a great writer, because he is way before his time, where you really don't need someone else to make you or to based on social norms. Let me put this: you don't need anyone to make you happy or to pursue happiness or to develop your own quirks, because this very small and timid individual was actually able to make a life for herself without a husband and without children. And both were when his writing in that way was ahead of his time. And even Catherine Sloper, in all of her frills and hoops, was also ahead of her time. She had the opportunity twice to get married and have the conventional life, but she chose not to. And maybe it was because she didn't recognize what true love was, but she developed a true sense of gratification in a positive light without submitting to social norms. How cool is that? And I guess that's what I look at when I read the book, and you have to get over. She seems not to be, and her character itself was a little bit on the shallow side, because you have to remember that a dude is writing about a woman. But the way he wrote about it was in such a way that the heroine ended up being strong in other sense, and that's how you actually have to look at the book. And that is why I have decided to write about it on my own terms too. Number one, there are no black versions of this book. And I can't imagine a character, especially an African American character, in today's world. Not only do I have never really heard of inheritance set aside for us, but I'm sure these types of families with good financial acumen do exist. But I also don't think that as a strong black, smart black women, you can survive without a whole bunch of encouragement and then be successful. That is why this character is so compelling. Number one, I had to look up compelling. It is basically a character that evokes admiration in a powerful way. The character of Catherine Cat Sloper of My Hamilton Heights, she's compelling because her family is completely unheard of, and her mother, that you would think would be a compassionate and supportive woman, and Lavinia, who's a nutbag, is her aunt. Even in spite of these women not being always supportive and comforting, she becomes the exact opposite of that. She's a creative. She finds her own niche, and she finds her own income because she can. And it's because of their lack of encouragement. No one ever told her that she could, and no one ever really tells her that she does things well. But she tries these things, find out that she does do well, and then she's extremely successful, right under their guise of neglectfulness and derision when they do pay attention to her. That is how a sister actually goes. You create, and you have to be successful because you don't have a choice. And it's not because you get all of this support and you know that people understand you, because you know they don't. You just keep going. That is what this character is. She's the embodiment of a magical black woman or a magical black girl, just for that reason. And the black girl magic goes on. She does have another aunt, her aunt Elizabeth Almond, who lives up the road from her, still within Manhattan, but more rustic. And they eventually go to a party where you see how a woman can shine when she's given equal admiration from both father and mother, and she has a husband, but that her cousin Marion falls into that mold. She accepts her role as a wife and soon to be mother, just because society tells her to. And it is here that Catherine Sloper meets the broke but handsome Morris. One of the things that tripped me out is how, even within a short passage of time, the novella in few lines notes passage of years. Things are glossed over, and only those things that are highlighted are those that affect the main character directly. It starts with Catherine being, I think she's either 20 or 21 at the beginning of the story, but she seems more mature because and people see her more as an aunt than a young cousin, because she has her own sense of style and flourishness of dress, but it just makes her more mature. And that, I think, is the effect of her Aunt Lavinia. Morris leaves and she goes and becomes a lady of leisure. She travels to Europe. She becomes a confidant to young women, unlike her Aunt Lavinia, because she's sensible and she's actually a good listener. And I think that comes from her being so tongue-tied for so many years. Her father dies of pneumonia, and again, the doctor could not save another member of his family from illness. Because what trips me out is she, in a way, becomes a constant companion of her father, even though he didn't want her. She basically continues to live and thrives under his neglect. And he basically dies. Then after the death, after Morris has traveled around again, I guess his business folds, he gets fat and bald, but the hair transfers from his scalp to his face in a luxurious beard. He strolls back after finding out that she never marries. And she basically may be a little bit more faded, but she hasn't changed at all. And she basically tells him go sit down somewhere. She has created a life, a rather full life, without him and the shenanigans. Her father had effectively disinherited her anyways, and she still is going to exist more without having to possibly care for an old fat dude with gout. So it ended up being a win-win. And that reveals just how smart she is and her strength about not succumbing to social norms and accepting someone that, even though he was a relatively good catch, he probably would have loved her unequivocally and wouldn't have squandered her fortune. That's the lawyer dude. She still made out all right. And he also wrote about a fulfilling life, even in spite of not getting married and never finally having kids. And as I stated before, I had to make her the black version a little bit more well-rounded and a little bit stronger from jump, and that is more realistic. And I think we are going to need still exposures to compelling African American, and it's still okay to be able to see strong characters, smart black women doing the damn thing in spite of a lot of odds against them, not a lot of support, and with very little love, and how we create the lives and the experiences that we want. And that's what I think a remake of Hamilton Heights or a remake of Washington Park should be. presenting that positive image, even in spite of other sideline stories and negative influences, how you still have the capability of being successful and being able to create beauty on that type of level. I think we're ready, definitely going to be ready for that. And uplifting and celebrating those neighborhoods and places that are going to survive this craziness is also going to be necessary once we evolve from this. So if anybody's listening that can make it happen, and if you are a screenwriter better than myself and you want to collaborate, because I do have the software, I think we need to make this happen. And that brings us to how I will be ending this particular episode as far as the audio version of the short film of the Hamilton Heights pilot. I'm a very visual person, and I'm able to compile a photographic montage of my thought processes of the first episode, from the father losing his life in the army, the brother, how I would love, it would be great if the set or the setting of this house, the brownstone in Harlem looks like, and why Harlem. Harlem has had many iterations from its discovery in the 1600s, in the jazz age, surviving the blight of the 70s and 80s and 90s, and where it is now and how it could potentially evolve on the other side of the COVID epidemic. It is just one of those places that a wealth of creativity and strength has always sprung forth. And isn't it about time that we make a positive African American image based on that? We have so many positive images right from within. People doing something. We had The Shy. We've had Living Single. We've had, why can't we have why can't we have positive images, single black women doing it, being creative in spite of like the gunfire and the things that sound surrounding them. Those stories influencing us and create the positive individuals that we are, but they shouldn't be the headline, and they shouldn't always or necessarily need to be the main story. They do make for good television watching, but again, I don't think that negative storyline, again, still needs to be the main story. And that's why the whole premise behind Hamilton Heights, and I'm not even stuck on that title, it's just denotes a place, or it's like a place marker because it is a true location in Harlem or in New York. I'm an Anglophile, a self-professed Anglophile. I'm very interested in Great Britain, but at the same time, I'm even more compelled about black folks in New York City, because they seem to be the most cosmopolitan and the most cultured of people that I can imagine in my little country. And creating a remake for it to be done well in a place that actually exists in today's time, going through the ages and then ending up in today's time, just seems very, if I find it interesting. And also it lends itself to several stories that can come out of this. all of the women that affect Catherine Slopers, they have their own stories. They have kids, their acquaintances. There's so many stories that could develop from each one, and taken from those angles can develop from each one of them. So, and again, I've done something a little bit differently with this episode because I did create a short film, kind of like a prolonged pitch about Hamilton Heights using pictures. And granted, I don't know who any of these people are. I just found their pictures online. All, I believe, are copyright free. And therefore, don't expect any royalties. I'll remove it from the film if I need to. But not only did I find that I had film creation capabilities, I also had the ability to start the audio and create a 20-minute film, basically describing or telling the story of my pilot. And I hope you will enjoy it, because I want to impress that it is more time for compelling stories about African American women against the odds that you will root for, and making and doing things in everyday life against great loss and no support. There are women like this that survive. I'm one of them. And there are just women like this survive every single day. And again, this positivity needs to be the headline instead of a byline. Just saying. So I hope you enjoy the next segment of this show, the audio version of the Hamilton Heights pilot. And I hope you will then navigate to the notes and be able to enjoy the full-length film as it describes the pilot itself. And again, thank you for listening, and I hope you enjoy. When you can smile through the pain, when you create beauty when no one ever tells you you are beautiful, when your love is ride or die even though no one has expressed that sentiment to you, when you can create an oasis anywhere. That's Black Girl Magic and the story of Catherine Sloper. The whole premise of my story, Hamilton Heights, although the story is based on Henry James's Washington Park, unlike that story, this Catherine is strong and smart and creative and imaginative, even when being told these things and never being congratulated about these qualities. And her creative side will save her in the face of loss, actually tremendous loss and rejection. She would create a world of beauty in spite of never being told so, or never being encouraged to do so. Because she was born into a family where her own father, God rest his soul, was the golden child of 5 children, of which he was the oldest. Two younger brothers who runs the family co-op and are continued members of the board, and his 2 sisters, Lavinia Sloper, who last name really is impediment, and her aunt Almond. He would serve 3 combat tours in Vietnam and Cambodia, and would go on to have a very successful career at the same time when the Black Panthers were protesting this war. His younger brothers were members of that particular organization, and it continued until today or the current times. He would use his combat pay and invest back into the neighborhood, subsequently saving the family home and businesses from foreclosure during the time where Harlem suffered from the inner city blight that would consume and destroy entire neighborhoods. And his foresight and investment in placing this family property in trust would save it for generations to come. And his daughter, Catherine, would be a direct beneficiary of it. The world of Hamilton Heights, or Strivers Row, or Harlem, is probably no bigger than about 20 city blocks. It was initially discovered by a Danish man named after his beloved town of Harlem in Amsterdam. It would become a world of creatives in music and in poetry, and the starting spark of the civil rights movement. And it was in Harlem Hospital where Martin Luther King, several decades earlier, would survive one of many assassination attempts before that one that took his life on the balcony of the Lorraine Hotel. But it would also become a place where the Sloper family would multiply and build their own businesses. And at one point, there were over 100 members of the Sloper family that expanded between Hamilton Heights, the park, the 20 blocks that comprise most of Harlem, in West and East Harlem. Everyone admired them, and at most points envied them. And when Austin Sr. would date his high school sweetheart, Ophelia, her family was one of the families that lived at 141st in Amsterdam, the apartment building, for a number of years. She would come with her single mother and two brothers from Philadelphia when her grandmother took ill, and they would care for her until she would die several months later. She would continue on in that apartment when her siblings would leave one at a time, both being members of the New York prison system for the majority of their adult lives. She had already gone on, stayed in school, and started her relationship with Austin Sr. They would remain sweethearts from the time she was a sophomore and then graduated from high school until the time he first signed up and was deployed over to Vietnam. He encouraged her and admired her smartness, and when she wanted to study to be a pediatrician, he supported her through her time at Columbia and through her studies at the medical school, and then at her residency and when she took her clerkship at Harlem Hospital. And it didn't matter to him that they had to move up their wedding day when she found out she was pregnant, because he wanted his child to be legitimate and an active member in the Sloper family. His goal was to carry on the Sloper name, and he took that responsibility very seriously. He would go on to earn several silver medals in spite of that most hated war, while his wife received accolades throughout medical school, her residency, and in her practice. And one of the things that you will notice is all the pictures of the family gatherings, the family in general, how elegant everyone looked and how happy everyone looked. There were pictures of Austin Sr. when he wasn't deployed, teaching his son how to ride his bike, the family's birthday party. And at a time when Harlem was so blighted, this family had a very insular and secure world, with the family home being restored to its previous greatness, with the crown molding, the steps, highly polished antiques from England. And it looked like an old school English manor house of yore. It seems like his mother, Mamie, and Austin Sr. had very similar tastes. He actually was very talented. He was not only a talented carpenter, he was also a very accomplished musician. And no doubt that his godfather was the late, great Duke Ellington. And there's pictures of Duke Ellington showing him or teaching him how to play. The family was known among the glitterati of Harlem for a number of years. Some of the brightly colored library had stacks and stacks of books and stacks of music. And even though Ophelia was little when her father would eventually pass away, he had already started teaching her scales. And she was a little prodigy, even without the encouragement of her mother. And so was her brother. He also was a very talented musician as well as an artist. His pictures and some of his drawings are still decorating the portion of the house that is inhabited by his mother. And it was obvious that even though she didn't want to, she did have a preference for her son because he was an extension of her father. And she never was taught how to love another girl, even though this little girl was almost a spitting image of her. There are other scrapbooks and paintings of children, pretty little girls and boys with plaits flying and fat thighs pumping, with happiness playing amongst the trees. You would see progression of Austin Jr. riding his bike in the street, teaching his own sister how to ride the bike, playing stickball and handball and hopscotch and paper dolls on the neighboring stoops. And as he got older, his dream was, through ROTC, was to go into the Army just as his father had did. He saw this as a mechanism to get him out of New York City. But this was not meant to be. His life would be cut short as a crackhead decided to steal his drugs instead of paying for them. And as he absconded, well, at least he thought he absconded, ran down the same street that a 7-year-old cat was playing skipping rope as she waited for her brother to come home from ROTC practice. When the initial bullets ran out, AJ reacted viscerally, looking for his sister, and as he snatched his sister out of the way as the gangbangers drove by, he would catch one single bullet to the back of his head. And as his body crumpled over and protecting a 7 or 8-year-old Catherine, the golden child, the spitting image of her father, gave his life to protect hers. And then the next scene is you would hear the mother screaming and coming up on the scene, flinging Catherine out of the way and cradling her son, saying, "I thought I told you to stay in the house. Look what you did." And then her aunt Ophelia piling on, saying that you really done it now. And then there's the scene cuts to a large church service with a grieving mother the graveside or inside of the church, and Ophelia has her arm around the mother, and again Catherine is actually off to the side, and no one is comforting her. She had, in a very short period of time, lost both her brother and her father, two of the most people that genuinely loved her more than anything. So even though she was not getting the support of love consistently from either her mother and then her aunt Lavinia, and when she could no longer or was no longer allowed to hang her creations on the wall or in the scrapbooks, she started helping her uncles create outdoor spaces, and it seems like she actually had a significant green thumb, where she would draw up the plans for their small backyard and the roof, and with her help and coaxing the flowers and the vegetables into existence, it would then go on to supply those fresh offerings for the co-op, and they would then also be used, or her designs would go on to be used into community gardens throughout the 5 boroughs. And this was done even with no help from her mother nor encouragement. It was just very strange that when her brother died, her world became more insular, and there was always times when the mother would just not even recognize her existence. She always demanded quiet when she was actually at home. Any exuberance or any show of extra care from Catherine was always rebuffed by her mother. And Lavinia only became a sycophant to the mother because she had nowhere else to go. So little Catherine started creating a world where she could create beauty, and she could create through flowers and some other things. She had a natural talent, unlike the Catherine Sloper in The Heiress. This Catherine had a natural talent for music as well as for drawing and craft and painting. The family that were on her street and basically throughout Harlem enjoyed her stylings, either the piano and the harp, for a number of years, but they knew somewhere between 5 and 7 o'clock the music would stop, unless she would be playing in church or elsewhere. And that was their cue that it was time to prepare their own meals and get ready for the next day. And this is where Catherine comes in, where she is running a little bit late, and she's preparing to go to her cousin's combination graduation and engagement party at her Aunt Almond's house, which was several brownstones over up on 141st Street. And it is in one of these meetings and it's from this meeting that instead of her getting delivered one of that awful looking dress, she actually has a boho chic style that she knows her mother would not approve of, and she doesn't even bother showing it to her. She just sits with her aunt Lavinia, getting ready and talking to her about the day's event, and her aunt Lavinia is just encouraging her not to sit over in the corner and interact with the other young people. And of course, Catherine initially is like, yeah, why are you telling me this? You know it is not going to happen. If I don't know the people there, I'm not probably going to say a whole bunch. And I know I'm not going to dance. But just like her own home, her Aunt Almond's home also has a piano. And one of her, the fiancés that are getting married, they all play several different instruments, and they end up going, oh, that would be kind of fun. They are the music trio, and she ends up entertaining at the party. So the rest of the people, the women, I thought were interesting or of interest in the book. The women, or the people that are closest to her, are the ones that don't accept her, with the exception of her Aunt Almond. Her mother, as I said previously, and a little bit more, and just to kind of compound on the backstory, the family actually acquired the property through a white family, and a white Jewish family, as everyone not of color was fleeing Harlem in Harlem's heyday. The home and apartment were set up as a community trust, protecting it from ever being sold away or over leveraged. And the participants bought interest or had shares within the trust. They had the option to reinvest a portion of their dividends back into their properties, or have a specific income from the property itself. So when Catherine set up his portion was a little bit larger than most of the original sons, because he had used so much of his combat pay to invest in the upkeep and the saving of the property from foreclosure. And it was set up that only his descendants, blood descendants, that means his children, would actually be able to benefit from and have a nice income from that particular property. And it ended up being a tidy sum, because she got his father's interest, her brother who passed, and then hers. And it didn't matter if they were male or female. So, which added to a nice tidy sum of almost $80,000 a year, because as the property was maintained and then upgraded, they could charge higher rents, and they got a pretty good living from all the other businesses that the family had owned. So she actually was getting a pretty tidy sum without even working. And also, because she was a direct descendant of her father, who was truly the golden boy, she had access to the family home for the entirety of her life. And she didn't have to depend on her mother to live there. And she wouldn't know that until later. Her mother could only not give her any insurance or any of her salary that she made on her own. She had no direct access to that apartment or the family's house. That was never in her name. She is a sloper, but it was in the progeny of the slopers, which were the children. She actually had to go to the board to get their approval to make any major changes to the home. And except for like painting and some other things, she basically could not make any changes. And she also, even though Catherine had been relegated to small rooms to the back of the house, she had every right to bounce her mother into the maid's quarters, because technically that was her home, and she could have put out Lavinia at any time, because Lavinia, as an adult, when she went and decided to try to run off and live with the married Reverend, Lavinia took her small inheritance, and when she took her lump sum, she had no say in the governing or the maintenance of anything on the property. That is the other thing, her backstory. She was never married, and as a licensed social worker, she worked several community events in the early to mid 70s, and that's how she met the Reverend Penniman. And she moved into a small one-bedroom house in Lower Manhattan as they carried on their illicit affair for a number of years. But when he passed away, his family actually moved, and come to find out, she ran out of money. She had lost her job at one point and had run out of money, and was definitely not going to get any support from that wife after the Reverend Penniman died. So she came in to the household as a potential for as a potential to be almost like a governess, or to help out with Catherine and then her brother before he passed away. But she was crazy. She was poorly equipped to actually help and garner Catherine into womanhood. She, just like the mother, saw her as a competition for the affections of her brother and family members and other men. She was a competition. So she never took, outside of dyeing her own hair and acting dramatic and trying to draw attention to herself, she never taught Catherine or knew how to draw out Catherine of being so reserved and so shy, because she saw, Catherine was a smart kid, she saw how people reacted to her shenanigans, and she knew she did not want to act that way. And she definitely had her own fashion sense, but it was a crazy lady with the blonde afro. That's what she was named in the neighborhood. And the only other woman in Catherine's life that could, and she did model positivity, was from her Aunt Almond. Aunt Almond was actually a little bit older than Lavinia, and she was truly the favorite of Austin Sr. She was a beautiful woman with a great smile, and she married a gentleman who was a chef within his own right, and he actually helped to manage the family's coffee shop and nail, and he was an expert pastry chef. And it was in the family's nail and hair shop that she would allow Catherine to showcase her art as far as on nails. And her husband also profited from the vegetables raised in the community gardens that Cat either designed and also helped to cultivate. She was a welcome addition in that house. It seemed like she blossomed with her aunt's positive attention, and she was actually very helpful in with her own children, and she shared love equally as much as she possible, but unconditionally. She never tried to overstep her boundaries when dealing with the great Dr. Ophelia Sloper, because she was the professional, the pediatrician, and her Aunt Almond was more than just a hairstylist and a stay-at-home wife. And she never sought to hurt what she knew was the love of her brother's life, even though she knew her sister-in-law was actually a very neglectful woman. And she would tell her so in so many words in upcoming scenes throughout the remake at Hamilton Heights. And she is kind of almost the non-judgmental, positive version of Ophelia. And I think that was probably one of, also in addition to her broad imagination, that is one of the how this Catherine became great in who she was, because of her exposure to her Aunt Almond's family, in spite of the neglectful and restrictive family unit and the environment that she lived in every day in that home. This podcast is my path of entertainment and a form of therapy and an outlet for creative freedom. But if you don't have this outlet and you're struggling with depression, anxiety, or addiction, call 1-800-273-8255. It's available 24 hours a day, every day. And there's also an on-site chat feature at suicidepreventionlifeline.org/chat/. If vodka is your problem, call 1-800-662-HELP. That's 1-800-662-4357. Then there's also apps like Talkspace and Doctor on Demand that will actually be able to help you right where you are in the privacy of your car at a fraction of the cost of conventional therapy. It's okay not to be okay, and it's definitely okay to ask for help. Please navigate to www.Dale's Angels Inc. for all special offers and updates on nerd news, as well as you can drop me a line at TennesseeFro@gmail.com or even leave me a 2-minute non-trolling message at 423-463-0658. All non-trolling messages may actually be read or played during the podcast. If you like what you're hearing and you want to support continued great content, please become a patron at podbean.com/thetalkingfro or put 5 on it and leave me a tip at paypal.me/Felicia DAI. And I hope you have enjoyed this podcast as much as I have enjoyed creating.